دمشق عشتك ريعانا وخافقة ولمة والعيون السود والأرقا. وها أنا ويدي جلد وسالفتي ثلج ووجهي عظم كاد أو عرقا. وأنت لم تبرحي في النفس عالقة دمي ولحمي والأنفاس والرمق، تموجين ظلال الذكريات هوى وتسعفين الأسى والهم والقلق. فخرا دمشق، فخرا دمشق، تقاسمنا مراهقة واليوم نقتسم الآلام والرهق. دمشق صبرا على البلوى، فكم صهرت سبائك الذهب الغالي فما احترق. وعند أعوادك الخضراء بهجته كالسنديانة مهما ساقطت ورقا.
Muhammad Mahdi al-Jawaheri is one of the greatest classical poets in the Arab world during the 20th century.
شممت تربك أستاف الصبا مرحا والشمل مؤتلف والعقد مؤتلق.
He rose to fame during the 30th and 40th and played an important role in shaping the literary scene in the Arab world through his commitment to values of urbanity and decorum and through his criticism of political decadence and oppression in his country. His best poetry, written along classical lines, has an ardent tone, vivid imagery, a grand rhythmic sway, intensity and compression, in addition to tackling a grand nationalist theme. Al-Jawaheri was born in the holy city of Najaf in Iraq in the turn of the century 1900. His father, his two brothers, and other members of his extended family were poets. His father, Abdul Hussein, was a religious scholar among the clergy in Najaf who wanted his son to be a cleric as well. So he introduced him to a religious topic while still at the age of 10. The origin of Al-Jawaheri's ancestry goes back to his Najafi Iraqi family. Since the 15th century, prominent families have inhabited Najaf, and individuals named Al-Najafi have entered and acquired the title Bejeweled or Al-Jawaheri in Arabic for their relationship to the books of fiqh and religious scholarship. These books were considered jewels of speech in explaining the laws of Islam. Afterwards, he himself became the owner of these jewels, hence his family name Al-Jawaheri, which means, as we suggested, the bejeweled. Muhammad Mahdi al-Jawaheri read the Holy Quran and absorbed its diction and imagery at an early age. Then his father sent him to great teachers to teach him reading, writing, grammar, rhetoric, and jurisprudence. His father and others planned for him to learn speech and poetry from such sources as Nahj al-Balagha or methodology of rhetoric and works of the great classical poet Abu Tayyib al-Mutanabbi. In his childhood, he displayed an inclination for classical literature. he began to read the Book of Eloquence and Demonstration by Al-Jahiz at Ibn Khaldun's introduction and the classical pre-Islamic poems known as Al-Mu'allaqat. It was early in his life when he first wore the clothing of a religious man, and he participated in the Iraqi revolt against the British 1920 revolution against the British authorities. In 1928, he published the volume Between Feeling and Emotion, his first poetry collection, which he had been preparing since 1924. Then he worked for a short period in the court of King Faisal I when he was crowned King of Iraq and when he was still wearing the turban of a cleric. Then he left the clergy just as he left work in Faisal's court. After he left Najaf for Baghdad, he went to work in the press and put out a group of papers, among them الفرات, the Euphrates, الإنقلاب, the coup, and الرأي العام, the public view. Al-Jawaheri was a revolutionary in his thought, culture, and patriotic stances.
إنها مهداة إلى أبطال تشرين وشهدائه الأبرار. جل الفداء وجل الخلد صاحبه، ضاق الفضاء وما ضاقت مذاهبه. في الفدي من جبروت الليل رهبته، وعنده من ضحاياه كواكبه. يتلوه رعد الضحى شفعا، وتقدمه من روعة الفجر زحافا مواكبه. في الفدي من جبروت الليل رهبته، وعنده من ضحاياه كواكبه. يتلوه رعد الضحى شفعا، وتقدمه من روعة الفجر زحافا مواكبه. جل الفداء وإن ضجت مآتمه على الشهيد، وإن رنت نوادبه. إن الزمازم في الدنيا لمصرعه، صدى الزمازم صبتها كتائب. جل الفداء وإن ضجت مآتمه على الشهيد، وإن رنت نوادبه. إن الزمازم في الدنيا لمصرعه، صدى الزمازم صبتها كتائب. جل الفداء فما ينفك مأربة لكل مستبسل عزت مآرب. وبورك الدرب مسحورا يتيه به جهم، ويحتضن الصنديد لاحب. درب الخلود بليلات لوافحه على الفدات، وجنات سباسب.
Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish described Muhammad al-Jawaheri as the third river of Iraq. Al-Jawaheri, or Abu Furat, as he is known among his fans, is against any oppression. He is a genius poet, free politician, and a revolutionary man. He was one of the strongest defenders of women's rights, with his rejection of anything that underestimated their standing, stature, and dignity. He called for complete independence, democracy, and guarantees of public freedoms, especially freedom of political parties and freedom of press. As a result of his attitudes, Al-Jawaheri was taken to Abu Ghraib prison, where he wrote his famous poem, Al-Dhalam, or Darkness. He criticized with unequaled audacity the restrictions imposed on freedom, public rights, and the political conditions in his own country. Al-Jawaheri was forced to live outside Iraq for several decades because he opposed the government of Iraq. However, the long years of separation from his homeland did not break his bond to it. He continued to write poems and articles that showed his great love for Iraq and his desire to return. Because of political oppression in Iraq, during the 80s, Al-Jawaheri was forced to live in exile, first in Europe and later in Syria, where he stayed until his death on July 26, 1997. Some of his poems were made into brilliant national songs, like his epic poem, Damascus, the Front of a Glory, sung by the Syrian singer Mahdi.
شممت تربتي لا زلفى ولا ملقى وسرت قصدك لا خبا ولا مدقا
I smelled your soil without hypocrisy or pretension, and I walked towards you not slowly but with a great joy. I made my heart my eye when I looked at you. I even doubted my eyesight when my pupil's eye was looking. His poetry reflects a monumental register of crucial events, social upheavals, wars of independence, and revolutions, which both Iraq and other Arab countries have experienced since 1920s.
20 بالفور في 20 عاصمة. لم يبقى عندي ما يبتزه الألم. لم يبقى عندي ما يبتزه الألم. حسبي من الموحشات الهم والهرم. لم يبقى عندي كفاء الحادثات أسا ولا كفاء جراحات تضج دم. وحين تطغى على الحران جمرته فالصمت أفضل ما يطوى عليه فم. لم يبقى عندي كفاء الحادثات أسا ولا كفاء جراحات تضج دم. وحين تطغى على الحران جمرته فالصمت أفضل ما يطوى عليه فم. وصابرين على البلوى يراودهم في أن تضمهم أوطانهم حلم. تذكروا عهد بلفور فقلت لهم ما تستجدونه عهدي به القدم. من قبل 60 من خزيان مولده أقمت مأتم أرض قدسها حرم.
In one of his poems, he addressed the issue of hunger in Iraq and blamed corrupt governments for keeping their population crawling in darkness and ignorance. He truly wanted to be the voice of the voiceless. Sleep, you hungry people, sleep. The gods of food watch over you. Sleep. If you are not satiated by wakefulness, then sleep shall fill you. Sleep in the swamps surging with salty waters. Sleep to the tune of mosquitoes humming, as if it were the crooning of doves. The poetry of Muhammad al-Jawaheri has penetrated the Arab soul in Iraq gradually and with ease for more than 40 years of Iraq's modern history. It has become a part of the emotional, intellectual, and political experience of the entire nation, no matter how much individuals differ in their attitudes toward the poet himself. He is more like the voice of the nation's conscience. While in exile, he wrote mesmerizing poems throbbing with nostalgia and summoning a famous river like Tigris, which figures out as an emblem of Platonic beauty. I greet you from afar, oh, greet me back. Oh, blessed Tigris, river of gardens green, I greet your banks, seeking to quench my thirst, like doves between water and the clay a flutter seen. This kind of poetry is highly charged with emotion and lyrical tenderness, mirroring a deep-rooted desire to unite with the soil of the remote homeland. Al-Jawaheri is symbolic of exiled Iraqis who were forced to leave their motherland, taking with them its pains, tragedies and suffering without paying any attention to the estrangement of the place. Al-Jawaheri knew that the city of Damascus is one of the most magical places on earth. The first step taken to Qasiyun mountain, for example, is like walking into a different world where time stands still and greets you with a mystical smile. The poet would sit down with fortune tellers who would read into the future and tell him about his fame for upcoming days and nights. The overwhelming power of the city plays on his imagination too, and drives him to wander deep into its alluring streets and restaurants. Built thousands of years ago, the city looked really mythical to him.
يا جلق الشام والأعوام تجمع لي 77 لا التاما ولا افترقا ما كان لي منهما يومان عشتهما إلا وبالسؤر من كأسيهما شرقا يعاودان نفارا كلما اصطبحا وينسيان هوى كانا قد اغتبقا ورحت أطفو على موجيهما قلقا أكاد أحسد مرأ فيهما غرقا.
His steps would carry him from one enchanted building to the next by way of walking or driving, despite his old age. Damascus for him was a place where worries fade away and fear is replaced with hope and love. People would ask him for his autograph. Children would follow him and recognize that they are following a great poet. In his eyes, the spectacular architectural designs in Damascus are like none other in the world. From the prominent buildings to the soaring bridges, beauty is found all throughout the city. The poet would interiorize these scenes and transform them into images and metaphors. He is a great lover of the city, and he seems to be under its enchanting allure. The streets are filled with talented readers and tourists. Colorful scarves, handicraft jewelry, and elegant vases in ancient souks and shops are just a few of the treasures right at the poet's fingertips. Weeks would be spent as Al-Jawaheri would be wandering on endless streets from stores to vendors, with each stop revealing even greater delights than the one before. Majestic landscapes and street tours are enjoyed every day almost, as well as clear starry nights full of the moon's glory. Not a single second goes by without the poet appreciating the city's marvelous beauty, wandering along venues of Al-Azm Palace and Al-Hamidiyya cafes. Al-Jawaheri's infatuation with Damascus has been culminated in many awards and honors he received. Thus, the Syrian Ministry of Culture would award him a medal for literary distinction.
أقول أنه أسعد الأيام والشهور والسنين التي عشتها كثيرا وكثيرا، حتى لا أكاد أكون صادقا وأمينا إذا قلت أنني ابن الشام، ابن دمشق. ومع هذا فهذه الفترة التي أعيشها منذ أكثر من 6 سنوات حتى يومي هذا، أني أعتبرها بحق وأمانة أسعد لحظات وأسعد الأيام والشهور والأسابيع والسنين التي قضيتها.
Jawaheri died in 1997 at the age of 98 at a hospital in Damascus. A solemn, public and official funeral was given for him. He was buried at Al-Ghuraba cemetery in Sayyida Zainab in the suburbs of Damascus. He is covered by a map of Iraq engraved on a granite with the words, "Lying here, away from the Tigris for good." The Syrian government honored the poet in his life as well as in his death. A state funeral was held for him in which prominent literary and political figures took part. Perhaps no other modern Arab poet has captured in his poetry the tribulations of the entire Arab world in this century as faithfully and vividly as Al-Jawaheri. The high quality of his diction gave his style a unique splendor and endowed his poems with the sublimity of a great classical genius.
يا بنت أم البلايا عانقت نسبا أغلى وأكرم في الأنساب معتنقا، راحت تمزق كل الهازئين بها، وحولك ساقطت مهزوزة مزقا، كنت الكفوء لها إذ كنت معتركا لسوحها، فرقا جرارة فرقا، تيمور خف وهلاك، وقد سحقا كل الدنا وعلى أسوارك سحقا. دمشق عشتك ريعانا وخافقة ولمة، والعيون السود والأرقا، وها أنا ويدي جلد وسالفتي ثلج، ووجهي عظم كاد أو عرقا. وأنت لم تبرحي في النفس عالقة دمي ولحمي والأنفاس والرمق، تموجين ظلال الذكريات هوى، وتسعفين الأسى والهم والقلق. فخرا دمشق، فخرا دمشق، تقاسمنا مراهقة، واليوم نقتسم الآلام والرهق. دمشق صبرا على البلوى، فكم صهرت سبائك الذهب الغالي فما احترق.